Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. Today we want to take a look at another sequence of events that unfolded via social media. If it couldn't get any worse in the Giants Twitterverse or social media verse, it can. I promise you, it can when current employees of the Giants are taking shots at former scouts on the Giants. It's just become such a muddled, absolute mess. And at this point, when you have former current employees going back and forth saying things about each other and taking shots at one another, it's really a clear indication that there's something going wrong behind the scenes. Reporters have been coming out with articles regarding ownership and their role in the degradation of this franchise, whether that be John Mara, whether that be Chris Mara, whether that be Tim McDonald, who is John's brother, nephew or son-in-law. I don't know, somebody. He's related to him. But nonetheless, it's a very much a nepotism-based team. And a lot of teams have that, right? There's teams, you look at the Cowboys, there's other teams that have nepotism built into it, but they're not given such elevated roles where they can make and impact things to a degree that the Giants have allowed things to unfold here. And it just seems that Mara is really just too far ingrained in this process. He needs to take a step back. He needs to let the guys, the football guys, the guys that know how to do their job, and he's paying millions of dollars to do a job, let them do what they need to do instead of putting his 2 cents in and saying, we need to go this route, we need to go that route. It's just been such a muddled effort in terms of the power dynamic that's been going on in between from the general manager to the head coach to the player evaluations, the vice president, which is Chris Mara. So now you're looking at an organization that just doesn't have a situated power cat-like system, right? There's no caste system. There's no hierarchy of power within the Giants, and it's becoming a serious problem because nobody knows who has any say here, except for the owners. And if you don't know the general manager if you don't know if the general manager has power, we don't know if Joe Judge has power, we don't know how much power they have, it's pretty fair to say that it's probably ownership that's making a lot of these decisions and having a lot of say in these things, because usually you know if the GM and head coach are giving their 2 cents and people are taking them seriously, Anthony. But I want to talk about what this current employee had to say on social media towards this former scout who had a hit piece come out on Dave Gettleman, which you talked about a couple days ago, which was pretty ugly. Before we dive into this stuff, Anthony, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling about, this kind of, I guess, state of this franchise with employees attacking each other on social media?
Yeah, I'm doing great. And I do want to hit on real quick the nepotism thing because that's something that I brought to the table months ago. I said the Giants are ran on nepotism. John Mara, Chris Mara, this is a nepotism business. They're running this like a family business, but this is not a family business because I understand, yes, it's passed down family to family. John Mara's father owned it. Now he owns it. Now his son will own it. I get that. But this should not be ran like a family business. They should not just be hiring people that they're friends with in important positions of power. They should be giving these jobs to those who are most adequate for them, who are they have the most credibility, the best men for the job, not John Mara's best friends that could take the job, but the best men for the job. And I hope that's the direction that they start to go in. And obviously, internally within this organization, there is a lot of turmoil. They do a pretty good job keeping it under wraps for the most part, but now we're starting to see some spillage. We're seeing a former scout, Steven Verdosa. He's out here talking about how bad the Giants front office was, how poorly executed their drafts were, and all of that. And then you have this other unnamed anonymous scout saying he was a loudmouth and that he deserved to be fired, but also the Giants are terrible internally, and he hears all these things at the Senior Bowl and otherwise. And then, of course, a current member of the New York Giants front office chimes in out of nowhere. Pat Hanlon gets on Twitter, and he's the director of PR for the Giants, and he's out here calling out Steven Verdosa, the former scout, and he's threatening the man. He made a threat to him on Twitter, which is just so bizarre. I mean, it's the Giants director of PR, and he's threatening a former employee on Twitter. I've never seen anything like that. It speaks volumes to where the Giants are at, the state of the organization right now. It is so bewildering, and it really just, like I said, it just shows the state that the New York Giants are in. It's insane.
It really is insane. I think insane is probably a kind word to describe how this organization is currently being run. But let me give you some direct quotes of what's going on social media, right? So basically, this guy Steve comes out and he has this big hit piece on general manager Dave Gettleman. Everybody knows it was him. It's pretty clear, where it's coming from, and he's had some pretty tough things to say about this organization. He really threw everybody under the bus, from the general manager to the head to the ownership to everybody. And he's like, they need a full overhaul of everything that's going on. The Giants are just complete utter mess. And then you have Pat Hanley come on, who is more or less respected, right? He does not make any decisions within this team. He does not make any decisions within the Giants organization, in terms of player personnel or any scheme relations. He's just a PR guy, communications, and he's been with the Giants since 1993. And for what I have to say about this is, I'm not putting any blame on Pat Hanlon, because he has no say in what the state of this team. Okay, like, he has nothing to do with how bad the Giants currently are. He is doing something completely different. So I'm not going to throw him under the bus, because, although I will say, going out on social media and making a comment like this is probably not for the best. You don't want to put any more negative direction toward a team that's already being freaking destroyed by the social media base and the fan base as a whole. People leaving, people saying, I'm not going to, buy my tickets again, or my PSLs, or, it's just a bloodbath out there for the Giants. But Pat Hanley came on and said, Steve, for somebody who has a track record that only we know about, you sure have a lot of thoughts about our operation. There is a reason you're no longer here, and every one of your tweets to revise your and our history confirms why. Keep talking. So he completely just torches his ass. And then, like, as Anthony said before, an ex-scout comes out of nowhere. Like, I don't even know where he came from. I'm trying to find the quote tee here. But while I do, he literally is like, this guy, Steve, is one of, like, the most hated people in the industry, right? So he says, Pat, I saw this and I will partially back you both up. Steve absolutely should have been gone long ago. Previous GMs talked with close friends that they wanted him gone, but Mara protected him. You guys not letting him 15 years ago is the smallest mistake you guys have made, though. So he's like, this is like literally the tiniest little thing. You guys have so much other shit going on that's so much worse than this. He continues on to say, that does not mean that Steve is wrong about current issues, though, because I never work with you guys but have heard horror stories on the road for the last 6 years. I'm happy to DM and be honest. You do a very good job, but Mara needs to fire several in personnel. I think our GM and his cronies are upset because they're finding out they are not respected. There is no doubt that Steve is the main source of these media writers, but it still doesn't make him wrong. I'm sure you have people on staff who would agree if given job immunity. Again, you guys should have let Steve go more than a decade ago. He made a lot of errors. He was a punchline on the road, just like Steve Malin. But a lot of what Verdi is saying is true, and I'm sure many others would back him up. Feel free to team if you want. Blah, blah, blah. So basically, the idea here is, like, he's like, the guy Steve who's coming out and hit piecing the Giants is not wrong. This is what the scout is saying. He's not wrong. This is an unbiased scout who's in the industry. He's not wrong about what he said, but he should have been fired a long time ago. Mara protected him. So interesting dynamic now that Mara has been protecting him for 15, 20 years. And then suddenly the Giants say, now it's time to get rid of him. Now it's time to go. Could that be an indication they're starting to realize that some of the guys in-house are a problem? Could that be an indication that some of the guys that Mara was protecting are now on the hot seat, or now being considered for being let go? I don't know if that means that the nepotism hires will be let go. I highly doubt it. But maybe they will just not consider their opinion less. Maybe they'll give a new GM, they'll give Joe Judge, whatever it might be, more power to make decisions, and that he can say, if you don't like what he has to say, just ignore him. Maybe Mara's starting to realize that there's some guys within house that are at fault and need to be kind of exiled here. On the flip side of that, maybe he's blaming Steve for it all. Maybe he's like, Steve's our out. Steve's our fall guy. Now we're good. We can fire another guy next year if it doesn't pan out. But he's our fall guy this year. He was the weakest link of my protection inner core, and that totally could be a reason as well, Anthony. You're looking at this. How does this make you feel? You have a lot of stuff going on here. This random scout saying, Pat is they should have fired him a long time ago to Pat, but Steve is the scout they should have fired 15 years ago, and the horror stories he heard about him was just awful, and he's behind all of these hit pieces on ownership and general manager.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to tell that Steven Verdosa is the guy behind all these hit pieces. We know that, but he also is known credibly to have worked with the Giants for like 30 years. So it is a credible source. What he's saying, for the most part, is probably true. He's probably speaking factually. But on the flip side, what this other guy is saying, that Steve Verdosa leaked a lot of stuff and was very loose-lipped and was not a joy to work with the Giants. That's probably also true. Probably all of this, there is some truth to everything that's being said right now. I'm sure some of it's being blown out of proportion. Either way, it's a horrible look on the New York Giants organization to have this stuff going down on social media, especially when the director of PR is involved and is seeing all of this. So we know that Giants personnel, people in the front office are seeing this. The PR of the Giants is absolutely seeing this. This is going on. They're definitely having internal discussions. But my biggest takeaway from this whole thing, granted, got to take all of this with a grain of salt, but if all of this is true, my biggest thing is if Steve Verdosa was here for the last 15 years leaking stuff, being loose lips, and he wasn't good, but John Mara was protecting him the whole time, then we just might have to owe Jerry Reese an apology, because Jerry Reese got a lot of flack because they were always saying Jerry Reese before every draft, there's something leaking. Somebody's being leaked. The Giants draft picks are always leaked before they make their selection. That's why, what was it, 2015-16, when they settled on Eli Apple, they were trying to get, I think it was Conklin. Someone traded up, took them. Leonard Floyd, same thing. Someone traded up, took Leonard Floyd, because everybody knew who the Giants were selecting because there were leaks, right? And we all blamed Jerry Reese. We said Jerry Reese could not keep a secret to save his life. Well, according to all of this now, it might make a little more sense that the scouts, more specifically Steve Verdosa, was the one with the leak problem. He was the one with the fat mouth, the one with the loose lips that was letting out all of these trade secrets for the New York Giants. That's what I'm gathering from all of this. So maybe we owe Jerry Reese an apology. And also look at it this way, John Mara protecting the scout that he must be friends with. Maybe he's friends with Steve Verdosa. This is where the nepotism gets involved. John Mara protecting the scout all these years cost Jerry Reese his job potentially. Because if that's why, if we're talking about leaks and not being able to land the draft picks that he wants because of leaks, all of that stuff might have been the fault of the scouts. And John Mara was protecting those scouts. And then he just went and fired Jerry Reese. So that's completely unfair. I mean, listen, guys, I know Jerry Reese, we give him a lot of flack. And most of the flack that we give him is because he sucked at drafting. But it's probably pretty hard to draft when everyone knows who you want to select. So all of those leaks really caught up to them. And I'm sure that having John Mara protect the scouts that were making these leaks definitely rubbed Jerry Reese the wrong way. Mark Ross, that's probably why Mark Ross has been involved on so many freaking hit pieces with the Giants. He's former VP of the Giants. He's been going out there for the past 2 years talking badly about the organization in the media, probably because of John Mara protecting people. And Mark Ross had to shoulder a lot of the blame. Him and Jerry Reese had to shoulder a lot of blame that they might not have actually deserved taking credit for, right? Because there's probably a lot of scouts and other stuff leaking information and causing all of these issues. So that's my main takeaway from that, is the fact that John Mara protecting a measly scout and not protecting his general managers who wanted him gone. That's pretty bizarre to me. And then another thing that I'll mention is that anonymous scout also is saying Chris Pettit. He's, I believe, is he vice president of player scouting? I think Chris Pettit is another front office member of the New York Giants. This anonymous scout is saying that he is by far the biggest issue in the Giants front office. He's got leaks. He's horrible to work with. He called him a kiss ass. He said that he's a bad person, like he's just mean. I don't know. Apparently, he's been a real issue. So whenever the Giants go ahead this offseason and hopefully find a new general manager, hopefully they clean house. They don't just fire the general manager and call it a day. They probably need to clean out a whole bunch of other guys in that front office and just rework the whole thing, because that's what they refused to do in 2018 when they hired Dave Gettleman. They did not clean house. They just fired the general manager and replaced the general manager, but they kept everything else the same. That's got to change this upcoming offseason. Everything needs to change. Chris Pettit, he's got to go. Unfortunately, Kevin Abrams probably has to go. I think that they just need to clean out this front office and redo it from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I'd also say, like you said, Chris, he had something to say about a player who they were considering in free agency, and then suddenly he was like, oh, the player's former agent called me an asshole or something, and then he was like, I don't want to deal with him, I don't want to sign him anymore. Meanwhile, the player was representing himself at the time, so it wasn't even like it was his previous agent. It wasn't even his current agent, the previous agent, and he still held a grudge. And I think that's like the sensitivity that's holding this team back. Like, if anyone has ever said something bad about these people, they're like children. They're like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to sign this guy. I don't want to consider that guy because someone totally irrelevant called me a name. It's just childlike, and it's very, very privileged. I would love to have some people in there that fought and grinded their way to the top, so they know how much it means to them and why doing a great job is so important. I feel like some of these guys were just given jobs and like just given, maybe not given jobs, maybe they worked. I know some of those guys worked their way up and did the time, but they were given the opportunity to begin with, right? Like if I was to go and try and become an NFL scout for the Giants and work my way up through the general manager, through the hierarchy of the management tree, it would be borderline impossible to get in. They were born with the privilege of being in. Like that was it. It was that easy. And they were all pretty much guaranteed an elevation in status at some point. So I think that they need some guys that are some outside faces. That's why we want that. We want to hire a third party. Ideally, in my perspective, and I think Anthony agrees, we would love for John Mara to hire a third party to come in and evaluate this entire team and see who's at fault, the culture shift that needs to happen behind the scenes above Joe Judge. Joe Judge can only solve the player culture shift. He can't solve the upper management if they're not willing to change. He can't fire Mara. He can't fire Chris. Can't fire John. Can't fire Tim. He can't do it. So there's only so much he can do in terms of changing the culture before that's as far as it goes. And also, I want to say before we wrap up this video, rest in peace to John Madden. Forever will be remembered. Such an absolute legend, and I hope he rests in peace. And we will always remember John Madden. So definitely a big shout out to him. And much respect going his way, and hope, condolences to his family and stuff, because I know this is definitely a difficult time. So as always, guys, hope you enjoyed this episode, talking about some really wild things going on in the Giants first right now. It's pretty bad. It's ugly. A lot's getting exposed. I don't think ownership's been put on blast like this since we've been covering the team, and we've had some pretty ugly seasons. I haven't seen ownership be blasted like this. A lot of you older fans out there will probably remember ownership getting blasted like this when they had to bring in who they bring in. You remember? It wasn't Ernie Accorsi they brought in. Who was the
They brought
guy?
in
George?
Steve Tisch. Oh, yeah. I know who you're talking about. Oh man, George No, it's totally slipping my mind. I
No.
know who you're talking about. George Best. No, not that either.
George
But I know
Best.
that
That's a
Steve
soccer
Tisch.
player.
That is a soccer player. Steve Tisch was also brought in at one point. Steve Tisch was, because it used to be the team was owned completely by the Maras, but then the Tisch family came in and took minority ownership so that they could fix the business operations of the New York Giants, because they used to have really bad business, and Steve Tisch came in to help fix that. The Tisch family did, at least. But I do know who you're
Yeah.
referring to. I just can't remember the name, because you guys got to remember, we're one of the younger podcasts. We're not those old guys. We weren't around during those times. We just hear stories, relics of the past that have
Relics of the
unfortunately caught up
past.
to the future.
Oh man, what is his name? I can't finish this episode until we figure it out. Let me see if I can figure this out. George Young. George Young.
George Young,
He
there you
was the
go.
one they brought in as general manager because the NFL had to step in because ownership was driving the franchise into the ground. It seems like a pretty similar situation that's going on right now, to be honest with you. So guys, hope that you enjoyed this episode. I imagine you're kind of pissed off after this episode, but we're here with you. We are absolutely pissed and trying to get it all out there for you guys in terms of knowledge and information, because it's all important to know, so that way we can react accordingly. Hold who needs to be held accountable. Put them on the public forum so they can answer to their transgressions. But make sure to like and subscribe below. As always, my friends, we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.